of our citizens and how the meetings have evolved over the last couple of weeks. So if we are in the middle of a deep subject where we might be heading down a rabbit hole, I apologize if I call a timeout and we try and redirect it back so we can make sure we have enough time. This evening we have to exit this room by about 5, maybe 10 after 9, so they can tear it down. And the church has been gracious enough to allow us to be here. And so what we'll do is we'll probably stop about 15 minutes short. So if you want to engage with the map, you'll have the capability to engage with the map, whether it's myself, whether it's Randall, whether it's Scott. And so far it's really worked in that process. So the study itself identifies several key areas for improvement, such as the potential for new detention ponds, storm drain diversions, and especially with the possibility of updates to town ordinances. But one critical element will determine the success of any of these efforts, and that's you, the residents and citizens. No matter what infrastructure changes we make, our drainage system will allow work as intended if each resident takes responsibility for managing water flow on their own property. This means regularly clearing debris from your drainage ditches, ensuring that culverts under driveways are open and functioning properly, keeping vegetation under control so that water can move freely through the ditches. The town may make major improvements to the overall drainage system, but we cannot maintain the ditches and culverts on your property. Your role is vital, and without active participation, even the best infrastructure improvements will fall short. Tonight we will review the study results and discuss how we can move forward together. The key takeaways is that improving our drainage situation will require collective effort by working together. We can make Double Oak a safer and better protected community as we try and protect it from that dreaded water. On the table we have the handouts. I discussed that will provide the additional insights. In 2007, the town did more of a micro study on the drainage issues. And while I was preparing for these meetings, I went to our eCode 360 website, which is where we have all of our town ordinances, resolutions, meeting minutes, agendas that go back as far as we could scan them. And when I typed in the word drainage, some of the documentation went all the way back to the 80s and late 70s. So drainage issues in the town of Double Oak have been here since the existence of the town. And when I reached out and talked to some of the other mayors from other communities that surround us, Bartonville, Copper Canyon, when I talked to Judge Eads of Denton County, he just kind of chuckles because he says, yeah, this is Texas and our soils are crazy and we've always had issues with drainage in Texas. So there is no one quick fix. There's no one absolute fix to the drainage challenges that we have in the town. But I think it's going to take a compilation of many different things that we do working with our residences, taking some responsibility from the town for the things that have been identified, the town's responsibilities, which you'll hear a little bit more in the meeting as well. So also, after this tonight, it's going to take us a day or two. It's Fridays tomorrow, so early next week we will have uploaded all of the documentation from all of the meetings. We have videotaped all 4 sessions. We will upload the video. We're not doing the audio, are we? We may upload the audio. It's kind of the same as the video. And then some of the notes that I've taken and some of the notes that Randall's taken and even Chris, we're going to combine those into an outline. And then as we collect the information off of these sheets, we're going to put together more of a summary of the 4 sessions, which we will deliver at a council meeting in the future, as well as post on the website and blast it out in an email. So this is an ongoing marathon process. There's no sprint in this at all. It's all a marathon. And this is a great turnout tonight. I appreciate y'all being here. Thank you. And we're going to go ahead and get started here. And I'm going to introduce Scott Rushing from Half and Associates. Scott, come on up.
Thank you, Mayor. Can y'all hear me? That's good? Okay. Great. Well, yeah, thank you for being here. I'm happy to be here. I'm with Half Associates. My name is Scott Rushing. I'm a drainage engineer or an H&H engineer. I'm a team leader, a water resources team leader at my company out of Fort Worth. I've been doing master drainage plans throughout my career. I've been doing this for 16 years. Some of the issues that the town of Double Oak faces are not uncommon across DFW. A lot of significant drainage concerns, a lot of high dollar project costs, and how do you fund that? Okay, so very similar situation throughout DFW. It's not uncommon. It's not just a situation in Double Oak. But I do want to present on the results of the study that I did, which is more of a macro level look at the town. So the mapping you see on this over here on the blue mapping you see on the map up here, that is the 100-year depth mapping across the town from the study that I performed. And the mapping only shows depths half a foot or greater. If I showed every depth, it would be all blue. So it's half a foot or greater. And you can see the more concentrated flow paths and kind of creeks and channels throughout the town. So my presentation will talk about how I arrived at those results, and then identifying some of the key flooding locations, and then some of the planning level improvement options to help alleviate some of the flooding throughout the town. Slide. Okay, so a little project background. Double Oak has experienced a lot of flooding over the years, but a lot of larger storms have occurred over the last several years, a lot of chronic flooding. Some of the challenges that Double Oak faces, Denton County is one of the fastest growing counties in the nation. Of course, Double Oak is mostly developed. There's some undeveloped lots and some redevelopment occurring, but there's a lot of drainage area from outside the town that's draining into the town, and that area is very rapidly developing and does have an impact on the town. Retrofitting existing systems can be very challenging. You do have some existing storm drain systems and channels throughout the town. Trying to retrofit those to fit what they need to be can be very challenging and costly. Potential adverse impacts downstream. We want to make sure whatever improvements are made are not adversely impacting someone else downstream or someone else's property rights. So that's a very important thing to look at, not only within the town of Double Oak, but also further downstream to Flower Mound, your downstream neighbor, to make sure we're not causing more issues for them as well. We'll talk a little bit about maintenance responsibility throughout the evening, and that's more related to the ditches. That's more on, or bar ditches out front of your homes. That's more related to the micro look at drainage. The study I'm going to present is more of the macro look at drainage. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the funding strategies or concerns there in terms of funding some of these large dollar projects. So some of the main study objectives were to identify those existing flooding hotspots throughout the town, and then to develop conceptual drainage improvements. These are planning level improvements to give you an idea of the scale of what is needed, the cost, just for planning level, budgeting level for the town. Moving forward, as the mayor said, it's not a sprint, it's definitely a marathon. A lot of these improvements will require a more long-term, multi-phase, multi-year approach. And that kind of leads to that last bullet point, just assisting with capital planning. How do we put together a plan to help fund some of these projects and to alleviate some of the flooding concerns? So I want to spend just a few minutes talking about the modeling that was done to arrive at the mapping that you see on the screen. So go ahead, slide. Within modeling, you have two main components for drainage. You have hydrology and hydraulics. So with hydrology, you're determining how much rainfall runoff is there after the rainfall hits the ground, right? There's a certain amount that's going to absorb into the ground, and then it gets saturated, and after that, it's all runoff. So hydrology is just the study of determining how much flow or runoff gets into the creeks and channels and storm drains and ditches. And then hydraulics is then, once it's in the ditches or storm drains, how does it behave? How high does it get? How deep does it get? How fast does it go? That's the study of hydraulics. So for hydrology, we use a program called HEC-HMS. It's a free program put out by the Corps of Engineers. It's very commonly used throughout my industry in H&H engineering. And then for hydraulics, we used a 2D modeling package called InfoWorks ICM. It's a Cadillac, we could say, Cadillac program for 2D modeling. It's the best of the best in our industry. And when I say 2D modeling, the way that works is the model has a terrain, and the rain will fall on the terrain, and then it will have the chance to go wherever it goes. It's going to collect And you can see how deep it gets in some of your more concentrated locations. So in 1D modeling, we know it's going one direction. In 2D, it can kind of go anywhere on the surface once it's in the model. And that's the way we generated the mapping that you see up here, the floodplain mapping on the map. Some of the data that went into the modeling was land use and zoning. The land use impacts the amount of runoff for your hydrology, which is the same thing with soils. We use the latest and greatest soils information. Different soils will absorb a different amount of water. We made sure we took that into account in different soils across the town. The rainfall data we use is from, it's called NOAA Atlas 14. It's the latest and greatest rainfall estimates across not only Texas, but across our region. They put that out maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it's the latest and greatest rainfall data. We use for that terrain I mentioned in the model, the terrain data is from 2019 TNRIS LiDAR data. It's very accurate information. So it's a very solid data set for terrain. And then we use some record drawings or as-built plans. So there, like I mentioned, there are some existing storm drain systems throughout the town. We made sure we got those incorporated based off of record drawings and how they actually were constructed out in the field. And then we did a field visit. We looked at all the major culverts throughout the town. And when I'm saying culverts, it's the culverts that take water from one side of the road to the other. So you see some of those more significant drainage paths kind of along through the town. The culverts that we looked at would be, where you see the deeper amount of water and more highly concentrated flow of water. So we weren't talking about the culverts in front of your home and your driveway. Those aren't the culverts that we incorporated in the model. It was all the significantly large culverts that would have an impact on a macro level. Next slide. So with flooding hotspots, we identified 13 of those across the town. You see those in the kind of purple boundaries or purple rectangles located at various locations throughout the town. Potentially flooded structures were identified. So on the map, you can't necessarily see it from there. When you get up here, you'll see the little green polygons or rectangles. Those actually represent the boundary of homes. And when I say potentially flooded, I mean just that, potentially. It doesn't mean that they're definitely going to be flooded. The way we determined those was intersecting that building polygon with the blue floodplain mapping you see. And if that polygon touched that mapping at a ½ foot or greater, then we just went ahead and included it as potentially flooded. So that's how the green polygons were determined that you'll see on the map. And then we looked at depth of roadway overtopping for some of the significant roadways throughout the town. So the table you see up here, I know it may be hard to see, but this will, like Mayor Johnson said, it'll be included with all the information published next week. But just want to kind of highlight some of the depths that we were seeing just over the roadway. At most, we were seeing 5 foot for the 100-year event at Simmons Road. And then most of the other locations, maybe around 1 to 2 feet, 2 foot of depth. Some areas 3 feet, some areas 1 foot. So that's the depth of water flowing over the roadway through some of these more significant culvert crossings. Okay, slide. So we then had to prioritize those locations. The way we prioritized them was we used 3 main criteria. One of those was the number of parcels or properties impacted by the 25-year flood event. It was just simply noting how many impacted parcels were in that flooding hotspot. So you would take one of those purple polygons or rectangles that you see, and then we would identify how many parcels would be impacted in that location by a 25-year flood event. And then, the next criteria was the depth of flow for the 25-year and 2-year storm event. And that was intended to identify both the severity and the frequency of flooding. So looking at the depth that each of those properties were experiencing within those flooding hotspot locations. And then looking at, not just the depth, which that would be the severity, but the frequency. So the frequency, this is why we look at multiple storm events. So a 2-year flood event is one that has a 50% chance of happening every year. So you've probably seen several of those over the past several years, and maybe even larger events than that. But that just denotes the frequency of flooding that you may experience on your property. And then the last thing we looked at was overtopping of the roadways. I kind of alluded to that earlier with that table. But that's for safety and emergency access. Obviously, if you have, a lot of depth going over the roadway, you don't want people driving through that. It's a safety hazard and can be an access issue during an emergency situation. So conceptual alternatives, they're up here on the map, and y'all have a chance to come up and look at them here later after we do the Q&A. But I do want to mention, these are conceptual alternatives. They're planning level. These have not been fully designed. They're intended to give the town a picture of what it would take to potentially impact or provide a more significant flood benefit throughout the town, and to help with budgeting purposes. So up on the map, you'll see there'll be some yellow lines. The yellow lines represent potential storm drains, underground storm drains that we would install to help pick up and collect a lot of water further upstream and then convey it underground and move it further downstream. And then the other polygons you'll see are the red polygons. Those are just potential locations of improving or providing new regional detention locations. And that's intended to help reduce some of the increases in peak discharge that Flower Mound may experience, or even further downstream in Double Oak may experience. So the big picture there is to provide some detention to help offset some of those increases that may be caused by some of the yellow lines of the storm drain improvements that are being proposed. So just, conclusion, it's a multi-year, multi-phase approach. It is a marathon and not a sprint. The funding required is fairly significant. I don't know if you want to mention those numbers now, Mayor Johnson, but it's upwards of $50 million if all the improvements were to be constructed. And not saying they all have to be constructed now, but it is a high dollar amount. So how that would be funded could be done by various ways. There's various grant options out there from the state or from the federal government that could help provide some assistance in providing funding for these projects. Those are typically on about an 80 to 75 or 80 to 20 kind of split. About 80 to 75% will be funded by that entity, whether it's the state or it's the federal government. And then the rest of that would need to be funded or matched by the town. So roughly 25 to 20% is what most of the grant projects require a community to help fund. And do you want me to talk about stormwater utilities now, or do you want to mention that later? Okay.
We'll bring it back up again.
Yeah, so another option or potential funding mechanism to help support some of these projects would be what's called a stormwater utility. They're pretty common across the nation and across Texas. There's about 146 communities in Texas that have implemented a stormwater utility. And the way that works is typically it's around $5 to $6 per month for residential users, for residential properties. And then for non-residential, it's based off of impervious area. So for commercial lots or churches or other non-residential land uses or parcels, it's based off how much impervious area that they have. And you collect those fees, and then it's a dedicated drainage fund or dedicated drainage dollars that can go towards funding not only studies, but also the improvements that are shown up here, or maintenance and operations and maintenance of any existing facilities you have. Those could be your ditches out front of your homes. And so that's a potential funding mechanism to help with the larger scale improvements, but also, I would say, more likely to help with the maintenance activities for some of the cross culverts and some of the ditches that are throughout the town.
One of as Scott had said, if you add this all up, just the improvements made, or that's been discussed in here, it's about $54 million. And so I thought maybe we'd start off the meeting by saying, listen, if we spread that $54 million over 1,225 parcels, over 5 years, it's only $8,800 per parcel. And if we wanted to maybe take it out to 10 years, it's $4,400. Now, who wants to sign up for that? Very good, you passed the test. Nobody has signed up for that, because that's not reality. All right, we talked about the stormwater usage fees. That could be a potential. Now, I had a business in Lake Dallas, and last year they implemented, or 2 years ago, they implemented a stormwater usage fee. And we started getting a bill on our, I think it came on our water bill. because the city administered it. And it was like $500 a month. And I'm like, what is this? And so I got in the car because I thought, gosh, they're taking advantage of us. And I drove over to town hall and I talked to him and said, well, what it is it's based upon the size of the parcel of property. So we had 8 acres. So we had 8 acres. It was $500 a month. That was a stormwater usage fee. All right, let's cut to the chase. What is it really? It's tax. Okay? So what you'll hear from me tonight, what you'll hear from the town administration, is we're going to call it what it really is. And now that is something that could be considered by the town. Could be considered. All right, we had a presentation from Half Associates about 3 years ago to council. They came in, they talked about this is one way that you can pay for things like this. And we all kind of, I was on the council at that time, I kind of like, no way, no how, this is ridiculous. Well, then you start to get into how much it's going to cost to make things and to fix things and do all that. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, if we want to try and address this. Secondary to that is we used to have a roads and drainage committee in Double Oak. And we spent a lot of time on roads. We would budget to fix roads. You've seen us do crack seal on your streets. We've seen us do mill and overlay on your streets. Didn't do a lot with drainage unless something happened. So over in Meadow Knoll, we had some road collapse. We had to go in and we had to take care of the cross culverts. All right? This council has split those committees up and we're filling them up with citizens. We are now looking at drainage, just like we were looking at roads. And so the one true responsibility that the town has is the cross culverts that run from one side of the street to the other. That is a Double Oak owned situation, okay? Whether they all work good or whether they don't work good. But we have identified through this study about 25 of those. What's great, we have way more than that. We have some cross culverts that we don't even know, and you may not even know if you have one on your property. I was out one day, it was after the rain earlier in the year, walked up on a lady and I was discussing it with a citizen, and we're watching this water run down through the grass. It just, the grass was kind of high. We didn't understand, but then we looked across the way. Well, it was a cross culvert that had been silted in or hidden in by the grass and it's over here and it's over here. Well, that's not easily identifiable. So one thing I want to ask the citizens here is that if you know that you have a cross culvert in front of your yard, if you wouldn't mind dropping, what is the website or the email for?
It's permits at doubleoak.texas.gov.
Yeah. So if you know you have a cross culvert in front, that'll just help us because we want to go out, we want to overlay on the map all the cross culverts in the town. Because this is an area where Double Oak can start to budget or use fund balance in order to start to make improvements. I can tell you that if you've driven down Cross Timbers, just around the second curve, just a little west of Cedar Crest, when it rains maybe an inch or 2 inches, water's over top of the road on a constant basis. There's 3 culverts, I think there's 3 there, Randall? Is it 3? Or
I think it's 2.
It's 2. The water there's so much water you can't get underneath the road fast enough. Now that's a good thing if you're on the south side, it's a bad thing if you're on the north side. So we're going to be evaluating all of our cross culverts over the next year or so just to figure out where they're at and what issues they may have. And I think we're going to find, and I know we're going to find, some of them are damaged, some of them are silted in, some of them are crushed, and those are things that we need to start planning for as a town in order to address those sorts of things. But in doing so, you heard Scott mention that we have to be smart about what we do. We don't necessarily start at the top of the town. We're going to have to start at the bottom of the town. And we're going to have to work our way up or work our way west or east or however we do that. So that is a project that will go into place at some time over the next year in terms of getting them all identified because we think it's important. And that's a town responsibility that we can do something about. As far as your ditches are concerned, as I mentioned earlier, we can't come into your yard, we can't go in and start digging ditches out on your yard. That is your responsibility. So, do you want to talk about detention versus retention?
Yeah, sure. So there's
and how it works with our ponds in our town.
Sure. So yeah, several ponds throughout the town. Most of them are usually wet. I know I've heard some stories through these meetings that sometimes they do dry up, but for the most part, the ponds throughout the town are wet. Those would be what's called a retention pond. They generally retain water, and there's not a there is some function in terms of providing a flood benefit, but for the most part, their amenities and their retaining water. And then when the flood event comes due, most of the water is just kind of passing through. There's not a lot of detaining of that water. So for detention ponds, those are usually dry before a flood event. And then as the flood event occurs, they fill up with water, and they slowly release that water at a rate that's typically at or below what the condition was that the pond is intended to meet. So that's the difference between detention and retention. There is some detention potential for some of the ponds throughout Double Oak, but most of them are retention ponds.
Can you touch base on Vickery?
Yes. So Vickery, the way we modeled Vickery, or the way we incorporated the Vickery improvements, we handle those within our hydrology model. And I mentioned earlier, the 2D model is based off that terrain. Well, that was 2019 data. And the Vickery improvements and grading occurred post-2019. So we could not run that 2D model at location because that terrain data was outdated. And it would have been a cost to try to incorporate that information. So what we did was we took the engineer's design plans for each one of their outlet points from their development, and we determined the flow rate, or what's called a hydrograph, coming off of that location or out of that development at, I believe it was 2 or 3 locations. So there's one there, and there's one off to the east, and then there's a few that go off to the north. But the primary ones that come into Double Oak are, right there to the south, and then also to the east. And those were incorporated into the model, and they were based off of design plans from the engineer that did the development. So I did not, it wasn't my job to review that for, accuracy or whatnot. That wasn't my job. My job was just to take what they did and to incorporate it into the model and make sure the flows coming into the town were represented the best that I could based off of the design that was done by that engineer.
So
Notice there's no blue marks inside their fence in Victory.
well, they said pretty high.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, that's because I didn't run the 2D model at that location on Vickery.
Right.
Right, so that was not included in the 2D portion.
So there's an association, all these citizens here are tied into a pond association. I forget the exact name of it. And throughout the process of when Vickery was thought about and when it was kind of fought out, actually, I think they were at this church or the other church. There was a lot of hearings, a lot of Double Oak citizens at those hearings. We were all very concerned about what was going to happen. I live off of at the bottom of the hill over here on Forest Park Drive. Where's all this water going to go? Where's all this water going to go, and so on. So the Pond Association, we are constantly monitoring this. And believe me, they are on top of it. Why? Because the water runs in here, it silts in here, it's running downstream to here. It percolates throughout the whole town. And obviously that has an impact on anybody that's downstream. So we will continue, or as long as I'm around on council or mayor or whatever it is, we're going to continue to monitor and make sure Vickery isn't getting away with anything. Now they've just about, and Randall can attest that, they've pretty much almost got everything sold over here. So now they've moved everything to their own homeowners association. And we all know that working with homeowners associations are amazingly fun. But so far they have been a good neighbor. They really have, because they take care of the strip along Tanglewood and some other things. So, but we're going to constantly monitor that, because it's having an impact on our ponds running throughout the town. So Randall, if you want to come up and join us, we're going to kind of open this up and start with questions and comments, concerns. Really, the floor is open. So who would like to go first?
I can.
Okay, so one thing that I want to start off with, yeah, it's actually already up. So we're going to talk about property maintenance just briefly, and then we'll kind of go to the Q&A. So one of the things that we look at, I can say for myself specifically, I get asked a lot, well, what are we doing about residents who have culverts underneath their driveway, but they're like blocked, and their water comes to my house, or they make an improvement and then the water gets diverted to my house. And that question comes up actually quite a lot. And it has since I came on 3 years ago, and it continues to be an issue. One of the discussions that the mayor and town staff that we've had a lot of is restructuring ordinances because our ordinances are not strong. They're not. One of the things that we need to do is restructure them in a way that's conducive to make the necessary improvements, because it's not a one-size-fits-all plan. Not everybody's property is the exact same. You have older neighborhoods, you have newer developments, and the newer developments, anything after 2000, there's an ordinance in place that they were required to adhere to for their drainage plan, and it has 100-year floodplain specifics in it regarding the hydrology studies and making sure that they are adhering to that. But most of the homes in Double Oak were built long before 2000. So there's really not an ordinance that's in there that says, hey, by the way, you got to do this, which often falls into the issue that we fall into. However, when a homeowner makes a major improvement regarding their driveway and they're tearing out their culvert, they do have to adhere to the new requirement standards. So a lot of times someone will come in and they'll say, hey, I'm going to go right back with what I had before. And it may be, I've actually seen 10-inch culverts. You can't do that because the design standard now is that you have an 18-inch culvert. And in some cases, it may be required to be larger depending on what's upstream of you. So if you have a 24-inch culvert up ahead of you, like at the top of a hill at your neighbor's, you can't reduce size. You got to either be at the same size or you have to go larger as you're going down the hill. So kind of point in case, everybody following me so far? Okay, so essentially what that means is there's just not a one-size-fits-all. There is a lot of maintenance that needs to be done as far as homeowners. Everyone knows who they are. We have a lot of new homeowners who are starting to see a lot of the issues. People who have been here for a while know exactly what they're dealing with. It's an ongoing issue. And then the new homeowners usually come in there going, oh my God, what did I move into? I'm getting flooded all the time. That's the calls I usually get. And then I'll go out and look at their property. One of the things that we look at the most frequently that would do everyone really, it really does a lot of good for you. If you've never looked at your property survey, I would advise that you get a copy and then you look at it. In some cases, the towns do hold a record of it. I can't say it's in every case because some homes are pretty old and their records were shoddy at best when it comes to really, really old records, especially if the house is older than usually around in the 70s or so. It gets a little bit more, less likely that I'm going to come across that record because usually there's just a residential card and then nothing as far as your build. On properties, there are a couple of abbreviations you'll see on it. You'll either see DE for drainage easement or DUE for drainage utility easement. If you see those markings on there, it usually gives a setback. And if you ever get a copy of one and you want to come down to town hall or you want to set up a meeting with me, I'm glad to go look at it with you and explain it. I do that actually quite a bit. The drainage utility easement is in there for designation, so if you do make an improvement, it doesn't mean you can't make an improvement in those areas, especially across the back of properties. Again, like I stated at the beginning of the conversation, it's not a one-size-fits-all scenario. Some drainage easements, you may have a bar ditch in the front, but your drainage easement may be in the very back, or you may have it on all four sides. In Creekside Estates, there are a couple of properties that have a drainage easement literally on all four sides of their property because it is a heavy hit area for inflow and outflow. And so when that comes across that, you have to pay really close attention to it. What typically happens is people will purchase a property and won't look at it and they'll continue to maintain their property. And as time goes on, as you cut your grass drops, turns into dirt, breaks down as organics, just keeps building up over time. 20, 30 years later, you're looking at a change of about six inches to a foot on your property. Believe it or not, it can happen, especially when it comes to leaves. And Double Oak has a lot of trees. And so you'll usually see a major change. When you used to have a 4-foot fence, maybe you have a 3-foot fence after about 20 years. And I've actually seen it in Double Oak, especially in Creekside Estates. I actually ran across the property and went up and it was like hip level, but it was actually a 4-foot fence. And so when those changes happen, you have to maintain those. If you don't, then you change the whole drainage plan to your property, which ultimately means that your neighbor adopts your issue. We do have a stormwater management plan. It is on the town website. It's a little bit harder to find, but you can always use the subject search at the top of the town website, and you can look for what is called the SWMP. We are a part of that program. It is required. We do use Half Associates for that plan. We have to re-up it I believe it's every 4 years. That's what it is. It's 5.
And
It's
and we'll
5.
have it on the web, we're gonna take it out of the, we'll leave it where it's at, but we're gonna make a copy of it and put it into this website, where we put the files.
And so a new study is done every 5 years, and then there's a revisiting, and as you go through each year, it tells you what the plans are for that each year. We actually take a look at the drainages. I usually do photos of those. I send those back over to Half and Associates. They introduce it into the stormwater management plan. There's also information regarding everyone's property and how it's supposed to be maintained. For instance, leaves, construction debris. If you have erosion control issues, meaning you don't have sod or something in place that keeps your soil on your property and not necessarily giving it to your neighbors freely, then ultimately it tells you that you need to adhere to that, because that ultimately can cause issues further downstream. And so that's one thing that Patrick talked about earlier. When you make the necessary corrections on a major level, you gotta start at the bottom up, because if you make major fixes at the top, all you're doing is sending water quicker to the people downhill, and the people downhill are already catching, excuse my French, but they're catching hell down south, because they catch a lot of water, because that's where it's supposed to go, and there's a 100-year floodplain. And I'll indicate, and I wanna start off by saying this, there is a FEMA flood map zone in the lower creek, just south of Kings. There is a 100-year floodplain that exists there. It is a FEMA designated zone. If you go to Denton County's website, if you go to FEMA, just Google it, Denton County FEMA, it'll pull up a map. You can actually change the stuff on the map. You can go 100 years, 25 years, you can look at the different zones, you can look at all of Denton County. But if you zoom into Double Oak, the only one that we actually have that exists is Timber Creek that flows through town. It starts over in Flower Mound near the golf course, heads west, and then it heads all the way through Double Oak, actually, and then it starts heading south. So I just want to indicate that that's actually one of the only 100-year floodplain areas that we have. But that does not mean that we don't have 100-year events. One thing that I noticed that when I came on it, when I first got here, I got a lot of calls. I came in spring, and as soon as I walked through the doors, my phone blew up, and everybody said, water's hitting my property, it's flooding. And I did a lot of research on individual properties, getting the map information, looking at the development. We don't have all topographical maps for every improvement, but for the newer communities we do, and we usually provide that information to the residential homeowners to let them know, hey, this is the designation for how the water's supposed to flow through your community. I do have some older communities that we've been able to obtain it in, but in the cross timbers areas, it gets a little bit harder. When you move east, is a lot harder than it is for the west portions of the cross timbers, because I believe there's six sections that are actually in for the cross timbers. And so we're more than happy to share those. If you're looking for that information, we'll definitely dig that up for you. You can always request that. I get a lot of residents who ask for that. One of the things that we actually have up here, and this is an example, please understand it's an example. I've said it for the last few meetings. I don't want anybody walking away from here going, he's telling me I gotta go out in front of my property, I've gotta go 12 foot wide, and I gotta dig a 1 foot down, and I gotta do 3 foot sidewalls or a 2 foot bottom. This is an example. We realize that not every property this applies to. So when we're dealing with, according to Chapter 3 that we do have for drainage policies for the new requirements, it starts with what we call a 3-to-1 ratio. So if you go 1 foot down, you need at least 3 foot. You need at least 3 foot out at an angle of around 18% grade is what it is what it roughly comes out to. Which means that you would do an improvement almost about 12 foot span from edge to edge, starting at where you start the grade at to where you reach the bottom, and you have a footer, and then you come back on the other side. We don't have a lot of that in Double Oak, except for in the newer communities. Taylor Oaks has it. I know that we have a lot of it in the Caruth Estates, and then Thornhill Estates.
And it stays
Yeah, in the Estates of Double Oak, yeah. And y'all's are exaggerated, it's wonderful. But theirs are, a lot of them don't even have 18-inch culverts. I think they're almost 36-inch pipes, 24 to 36-inch pipes underneath their driveways. And in that particular community, there literally is drainage across the back, drainage utility easement, down the sides of the property in most cases, and then across the front to move it out, and then it dumps out on the other side of 407. I'll try not to digress from that, because I know we're talking about the southern portion. The main point that I'm making is the improvements that need to take place that we have direct, immediate contact with, that outside of spending millions of dollars. One is ordinance reform. We definitely need that. How does that impact each homeowner? One thing that the council, that I believe the council is definitely gonna take into consideration, will definitely not do, is put an ordinance in there and then tell you, by the way, you need to go spend thousands of dollars in the next 30 days to do improvements, because everyone's hurting right now. No one's looking to spend a lot of money immediately. It needs to be conducive, and it needs to be in a way that makes sense over time. Typically, when an ordinance gets adopted and you're talking about that kind of reform, I'll use an example like I did in the last meeting. I came from the city of Irving. In the city of Irving, we had a fence ordinance, and we gave 2 years for the reform to take place. So we set a hard and fast date, it was put into place, it was sent out publicly, and they were to adhere to the new fence ordinance requirements, and they had 2 years to do so. After the 2 years, if you were out and about and you were a code enforcement officer and you saw one that wasn't in compliance, you gave them a notice and you gave them time to fix it. But at that point, you were in the enforcement piece. Something to that degree may need to take place. Again, though, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It may be something as simple as, if you do have a culvert underneath your driveway, you need to clear it out. But you also need to do it in a way that you're not holding water in that culvert, which means that you need to daylight. What I mean by that is you need to move water across the top of your property in the bar ditches in the front. In this case, I'm just going to talk about the front bar ditches. I know not everybody has that. In the front, if you do have a bar ditch, you need to clear it out enough for the water to move through so that the flow moves downstream so that it moves away from the property. That's ultimately one solution. The other solution that we typically find a lot of times, and I get this question a lot, my neighbor installed French drains, I'm getting water, are they allowed to do that? Aren't they supposed to have a permit? I don't see a permit online. That is not a requirement by state code at all. If someone installs French drains on their property, they're allowed to do it. You don't have to get a permit for it. It is not a requirement. We do not have sidewalks, and we do not have curbs. If you're going underneath a sidewalk or you're entering into a curb where a stormwater drainage plan would go, then at that point there would be a permit required, but unfortunately none of that applies here. But when a person does start to install it or calls out to request for one, I let them know, hey, you need to stop at least 5 feet from the property's edge, because you do need to be able to allow water to absorb on your property before it enters into your neighbor's property. Now, during high water events, I mean, it's not perfect in that case. I mean, you do the best that you can, but water is going to move where it will, and you're trying to move it in its designated zones, which leads to the other part of improvement. When moving water across your property, because you are having flood issues, you do need to move it into the drainage utility easement areas if it's indicated on your map. If it's not, then you may need to just take a common sense approach and actually have your property either 1A looked at by a landscape engineer or someone who has the background in that field, so that they can actually look at your property topographically and see where the water flow is actually supposed to go and move the water out into those areas, not at your neighbor's house, and then where there is no drainage easement whatsoever, and then all of a sudden they have all the issues and it's directing them towards their back door. So there's a common sense approach that needs to be taken whenever that stuff's in there. Then there's also things like abutting fences to the ground. You're not supposed to do that. Your fence is not there to be put in place so that you are able to block the flow of water to keep it from coming onto your property. Water is supposed to flow across your property. It just needs to be determined as to where it's supposed to go and how to effectively move that water. So a lot of times when I usually see new fences getting installed, we let them know, hey, you can't put your fence against the ground. Sorry. That's not how it's going to work. You actually have to have it lifted. You actually have to allow water to flow through the property. So I say all that to indicate if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have at this point.
One more thing.
Yes, sir.
So I was contacted by a Half Associates it's been about 4 weeks now, 4 weeks ago. And as you know, we have Kings Road. It has been designated into the TRIP 2022 project. That's a large bond program that surrounds the entire county of Denton, and it releases and provides funding to get roads built, roads improved and such. About 4 years ago, the town committed to be a part of that. With that said, the town can still get out of that. But being notified about 3 weeks ago that says that they're starting to release some funding for engineering work, specifically at Kings Road, McMakin, Shiloh, Kings Road, I'm missing one there, and Hawk, thank you, and Hawk Road. Now, nothing's been designed, nothing's been done. But what typically happens is when they start to release funding, that means the project could be in a state of potential, at least engineering, all right? When, everybody loves Waketon Road, right? It's awesome. It's the double oak drag strip, it's great. That was a part of the 2008 TRIP program for Denton County. When did it finish? Last year. So what is that, it's 10, about 14 years. So there's no guarantee that just because they're releasing funding, that Kings Road will automatically kick up. But the town does need to become prepared. And so nothing sleeps here in Double Oak. We are a prosperous town, even though we don't have a lot of growth potential, we've got a lot of things going on. So we did a survey this previous spring and summer as it relates to Kings Road. We're gathering that information, and we may start here after the first of the year, start to do some public hearings as it relates to should we or shouldn't we on Kings Road. Why I bring Kings Road up into this is that when it talks about a lot of the drainage challenges that are off of Kings Road, if the town was to move forward and do some enhancements or changes to Kings Road, we would want to build in a lot of the drainage challenges along that road and get them to be a part of the project, the TRIP 2022 project, because in that instance then, Denton County is going to help pick it up. Right now it'd be estimated if we were to do Kings Road in a certain manner and it's not a two-lane divided highway like it said in the old mapping, right now it's estimated between $5 and $6 million to do Kings Road. And right now the town is committed in for $500,000. So when we did Simmons Road, I think the town paid around $100,000. It was about a $3 million project, and Waketon Road has turned out to be the $100,000 investment we made was right around $5 to $6 million. So alone, Double Oak does not have the funding source, does not have the resources to go out and make major improvements to roads. The partnership we have with Denton County has been amazing. And if anybody knows Judge Eads, and I'm sure many of you have because he started as a commissioner here, he's lived in Double Oak, he's a very good friend of Double Oak, and so when it comes to speaking to him about anything that we may need in Double Oak, he is very, very open to listen. And so I just bring that up to say that if we look into, and as we look into the potential if we did something with Kings Road, we would factor in a lot of drainage work that we would have to make sure we get the water through Kings Road, as well as also to be able to handle by Flower Mound. Do you want to speak about Flower Mound? So again, but rest assured, nothing has been designed, nothing has been started with Kings Road. It's just the beginning of conversation.
So, kind of going back, Flower Mound actually reached out about 2.5 years ago, looking at the Denton County Improvement Project for the TRIP 2022. That's correct, right? Okay, just making sure. The TRIP 2022 project, they were looking to access some of the funding and seeing if we wanted to partner to move drainage basically along the Bridlewood addition all the way out to Lusk. And what I mean is starting at Kings Road that travels north to south and then it turns east to west. From that location, carrying it all the way out towards Lusk because they deal with quite a bit of flooding on the northern portion. Some of you are very aware that our amazing fire department does a really great job of cleaning out Flower Mound side where we actually have a steel structure that is over an inlet that receives water, then moves underground and then dumps it out at the golf course. And they have to clear that pretty regularly because of debris, kind of like what we're kind of talking about earlier, stormwater management plan. I mean, there's only so much you can do, but eventually debris is going to clog it. It can't keep everything out. And so essentially what it does is it blocks up. They want to improve that section. So they actually reached out and have asked us to sit down and have the discussion again. On the initial part, the answer was no, because it was a very expensive project. It was millions of dollars. And they were looking for commitment. They had 3 different conceptual designs. The 3 designs at the time, I don't know what they're going to be this time, and they may be the exact same thing, but just so that you're aware, one of them they looked at was moving water top of surface, so basically putting in a drainage ditch on the north side along that area all the way down to Lusk, and then moving down south on Lusk to where they actually receive the water over by the golf course. That's one design. The other design that they looked at was One I don't think that they're going to do, I think they just did a conceptual design thought process, but they would end up having to take some homes out in the Bridalwood addition because they would have to insert another pipe that travels underneath the homes there and puts water out towards the golf course. Believe it or not, Flower Mound actually pays somebody to dive that pipe. It's large enough. It's really, actually, it's a pretty huge pipe. They have to actually look at it and make sure it's clear of debris. They actually do that pretty regularly. I found that I didn't know that they did that, but they actually made me aware of that, and they actually have to check that pipe pretty regularly just to make sure there's no deficiencies, because you're talking about building over the top of that. It's pretty deep, but they still have to have it looked at pretty regularly. So they were talking about doing another one of those. And then the last design, which I think the one that they're leaning more towards, was as the road's being ripped out in that section, going back in and putting in box culverts, essentially about as wide as the road is. So several box culverts, taking drainage from the south and the north and moving it down Lusk, and then out towards the golf course in one portion, because we already have a drainage area that's over there, and then also going down Lusk and then dumping it out on that end and moving that water flow. So they actually have reached back out and they've asked us to have discussions once again, now that they know that we are at least potentially talking about being a part of that TRIP 2022 project. And so we're going to sit down with them and see what they're asking to do and what they're looking to do. So just want to make you aware of that. They're looking to make those improvements. To echo what Pat said earlier, the time to do a drainage improvement, especially when you're talking about the amount of dollars that you're talking about spending, is when they're opening up roads and Denton County is willing to put a lot of funding up, especially when it comes to engineering funding. When the engineering funding comes in and they start releasing that money, and have they already released it, do you know?
They're starting to.
Okay, so they're starting to release the engineering funding for that improvement of that project, to start looking at what the conceptual designs may be and what would be needed. Those drainage improvements, we can start looking at least in that area, because that is the southern portion that we need to actually start looking at, and potentially we could utilize money at that point in time when the road is being improved to start changing, upsizing culverts that need to be changed, and looking at adding additional culverts in the necessary spots that we may not have that are there, and that those improvements being taken place would actually be a great utilization, especially when you're talking about, and please don't go and say that I said this and this is forever the thing. It's a potential at $500,000 investment, getting something that's millions and millions of dollars. I don't know what the end dollar amount's going to be, because at the end, that's really, they usually do it based off of a percentage. So just kind of wanted to put that out there. So I don't want anybody going back after about 20 years going, they said it was going to be $500,000 at Crossroads Bible Church and said that's all we were going to spend. So that's a starting point. I don't actually know what the end is going to look like. So.
Go ahead and open it up.
All right, outside of that, if you have any questions, I'll move from right to left, front to back, and then we'll go through that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We've been coming to these meetings about flooding for at least 10, 15 years. And when they went to build behind, we're on Brown Cliff and across the road behind us, the water goes up from there 2 streets up above where grade and everything starts, and it flows down into our property. And when the people behind us went to move in, they were going to add their fence to our property. I said, no, you can't do that. That's a flood thing that comes over to the drain. So we didn't. And then 2 years ago, when the fence had to be replaced, and the neighbor calls and she said, our fence just came down. Can you come take your dogs? And I said, yeah. So I go over there. She says, why is this little hill built that's behind my garage and stuff? I said, well, I guess they're forcing more water onto my property. And when she took her fence down, the guy that I told could not clear the ditch and block it had taken over that whole acre next to him, and there is no ditch that flows down to the end of the road. It strictly all comes to me, and because of the thing now about the fencing and stuff, it's flooding my backyard, and I have many pictures to show you. And I know I have to go in and dig a ditch, because when you carry from that many streets up, you're carrying not just water, you're carrying dirt and stuff. But also, when it's supposed to flow out into Twin Lakes, and the house behind the end of that, they allowed that gentleman to build a brick wall, and it's only like a foot or so from her fence, so that slows the water from going down to Twin Lakes, which backs it up onto our house, into our street, and everything else. And I thought the mayor and them were going to be coming around to take a look at that so I could talk to them about it, but I never did see it.
So
And I know you said I could donate the property and let them, they fix it. No, I need to have the, because I don't think it flows around all around Cliff anymore either like it used to.
You're at 325, right?
No, 375.
375? Okay. So close.
The people next door are the ones that I'm
Yes.
talking about that were having trouble.
I think you have new neighbors across the street.
Yes, I do.
Okay, I actually talked to
Yeah,
them
we
recently.
have-
They came to the last
Yeah.
meeting. Yeah,
We all had the
yes.
information mixed up, and I said, okay, we're gonna have, when the rain hits, you're gonna have problems, because I have problems in the streets too. But
Yeah, and that's a cross, so that section specifically is a cross section, because I believe on yours, you have at least, I know on one fence line, I think you have two openings on your fence line with pipe underneath the fencing, on the front and the back, correct?
Yes, and in the middle.
Yeah, so we can look at your specifically and pull your, I know you do have a drainage
And I
utility
do
easement,
have my
hands down.
flat, yeah.
Yeah, and we can actually sit down and look at that, and then look at the neighboring property behind. We are aware that that water does cross through there. It's actually indicated on this map, where that water does cross through. Yeah. And it is actually highlighted, I believe, in their section specifically. It also talks about an improvement on that one as well. Yes, okay. So I was pretty sure of that.
You have in both, so I should have mentioned earlier, in the handout, we did a comparison of the 2007 drainage study that was more micro with this current drainage study, which is more macro. Just kind of the what's different, what's changed, what's different sort of thing. And actually your area popped up on both of the drainage. You're one of the few that was consistent. You know, I can't speak for councils before this and mayors before this and all this, but you did come up on both very consistent.
Yeah,
Which
and
is
I
where it
have
called out
copies
some
of
of
neighbors that used to live next to me that aren't here now, of when we all petitioned the county, or the, double O to help us.
So, and just to point out what you're talking about, just to kind of encapsulate that, because I actually didn't mention this earlier, we've talked about this a couple of times. There have been several instances where there's been requests from residents, and then the town went through engineer studies, and then when they get down to they get an approval to do the project, but then it comes down to, because Double Oak is owned pretty much a majority by private property owners. In most cases out to the middle of the road, not in all cases, it comes down to whether or not the homeowners are going to allow the project to actually take place. And in some instances, they've actually canned the whole project after about one or two residents will basically say, oh no, you're not bringing that through our property. I know everybody else wants it, I don't want it, and then it kills the whole project. That tends to be one of the biggest outliers to the whole, to actually getting things fixed. And if I remember correctly, when we were doing the improvements on this, y'all were trying to do majority of stuff out towards roads, or at least in the areas that we had control over, correct?
Right, yeah, so the improvements that we put in for at a recommended level or a conceptual level, try to follow the roadways,
Yeah.
highways, try to avoid going through private property
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Yeah, and we've always had water that flowed, but now it's flowing through our whole yard. Fortunately, it's missed our pool and it's not come into our house yet. But
Yeah.
I've never seen so much water. We haven't had that much rain anyway. So something's changed in where it's flowing from. And I noticed the guy behind us too also has a big, it's like a foot long coming out of his back fence right into our ditch.
We need to look at that. That you're not supposed to be.
That's different. Yeah, we need to look at that
So
one.
I need somebody to come out and take a
I
look.
think the retention
And
ponds
again, I know I have to dig the ditch, but that's.
Yeah.
are going regularly. I mean,
That's just
the idea of
more
sod
water.
in our area is just not possible. Every bit of topsoil has been washed away. Our ditch is now 6 feet deep because the water runs so fast.
And where are you at?
Or a
They're in
plantation.
plantation and the ditch, at the end of the detention ditch.
Okay.
Plantation's far
My
left,
question,
down at the
though,
bottom, far left.
That's right off of Shiloh.
Yeah, it's the last two streets that are on there.
Okay.
They're the first one before you get to the
I got it.
south,
All right, I got it.
second to the last street.
So
I know exactly what y'all street is.
And then the top of the hill, just everything below it is just completely flooded.
And then everything from Pepperport also comes all the way over
Yeah.
on the plantation, yeah.
Y'all are flat over there.
My
for the most
question
part.
though is Stain Ranch.
When they build that, what's gonna happen?
Where's that
Where's
going to go?
that gonna go?
So, one of our Pat Wellen, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, went to the meeting, and she actually came from that meeting over one of the drainage meetings, and the question came up, where's all this water gonna go from here? She said they never mentioned
Well, they
it.
don't
So
care.
we have to do, is it gonna go west?
I attended that meeting on Thursday, Ginger Brittain,
Did they-
35
he said they didn't
Simmons
really mention
Road. It was addressed. They talked about it. Pat did raise the question. I talked to the owner, the engineer, and then the other developer that was there at that meeting. We discussed, and I indicated the flooding that travels from the pond there at the corner of Kings, Shiloh,
Correct.
And
across,
plantation,
it goes to you guys, and that on that curve, we've had to have the road closed on several occasions because of the flooding.
Yeah.
They were not aware of that. They made a note of that.
Okay.
We also discussed the pond that's there at that intersection. That pond will remain. It will not be removed in their design at this moment. So they are aware. We talked about some other issues in that area that they were not aware about. I gave them some references to look into. They are not anywhere near close to going to P&Z with Flower Mound. It'll be after the first of the year before any other action is probably taken. Flower Mound requires a lot of pre-meetings, a lot of comments back and forth from developer, from committees. They like green zones, they have conservation group as well that monitors all of this. So they are very in tune. They're very aware to the area that they are developing. So if you'd like to learn more about that development, there is a plan of their master plan that's filed with Flower Mound. It's on their website that you can pull that up and look at how many homes, 173 to 193. There's been a little bit of change on part of that. But since we are at the corner of Kings and Shiloh and McMakin, my husband and I are very aware and are very active in monitoring that outcome of that one.
So do they have,
So we don't know where the water's gonna go.
do they have to keep Double Oak informed since that obviously can affect our town?
Technically, no.
No,
That's why we bird dog Vickery as best we can. It comes back to the citizens to stay as on top of it as we can and have voices
Well,
heard.
so what happens if what they do,
Well,
causes us
we'll
to-
raise it, as Ginger said, we're not gonna sit back quietly.
okay,
And that's why we're dispatching, so the next time they have a meeting, I'm gonna go to that meeting,
okay.
as well as probably some other council people. We're gonna watch this, because I'm concerned about this, right here.
Yeah,
I'm
I mean, 'cause
concerned.
we're right there too.
I'm sorry, if I could just make one more comment.
Mhm.
During the process of developing Vickery, I was on council. We attended, as council members, those meetings and monitored what Copper Canyon and Toll Brothers was doing. As Double Oak only backs up to the Vickery property, and it will be the same. Flower Mound is doing this development. We will have very limited amount of say in the process. What we did for Vickery, the mayor and the council wrote a letter asking them to do certain retaining walls at certain heights on certain areas, to please to take that into consideration. During the developmental process, they did, and they did do what we asked up to a certain point. I feel comfortable that dealing with the current owners of the property of Eden Development, Cummings, Fame, Ranch, that they will be very open and very cooperative with Double Oak and listen to our requests if presented.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's the regulatory body that would regulate legally Flower Mound's actions with regard to the neighborly improvements they'd have to do for flood control? Who regulates that?
So Flower Mound would ultimately dictate what goes on with that. I mean, they would still have to introduce stuff to Denton County because they're still a part of Denton County, and they would be a part of that. But Flower Mound would ultimately be in charge of that, along with the stormwater management plan they would have to introduce. I know I've had previous discussions with the property owner who purchased that land and had several conversations with them about as far as what their ideas were as far as improvements. Again, that's conceptual. That's a lot of what Ginger's actually saying as well. These are all ideas at this point. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go with any one project or improvement, but I do know that when I talk to them, one of the things that I really try to impress upon them is that a lot of the residents there want to keep the same town feel that they've always had. So when they do the improvement project, a lot of that stuff, a lot of it, we would like to see the traffic move towards 1171, not out towards Kings Road. That is something that they do know that everyone in that area is asking for and is requesting. And when they do the conceptual design for the road improvement for that intersection, that drainage will have to be taken into consideration, because a lot of that is gonna have to, there's gonna have to be improvements done with that. When they do, that is something that we would be, I know that we would go and we would speak our piece. They can't backflow water to us, because the water drainage plan has to adhere and has to follow the drainage
I
plans.
understand who's the arbiter of that discussion, who arbitrates that between both?
Flower Mound. Flower Mound dictates it, yes.
Not the county.
They're the owner of it. They own the land, they own all the rights over there as far as that improvement goes. Matter of fact, they actually own both sides of, that specific intersection. They actually own both sides of the pavement itself. So Double Oak actually doesn't own the road itself either in that case, so that you're aware.
Which road?
McMakin and Shiloh.
Ah.
So we have Kings, but it literally stops even if right about where actually, matter of fact, not even at the stop sign, because they actually maintain the stop sign. At one point, I went down there to do an improvement on the stop sign, only to find a sticker on the back that said it was Flower Mounds. I gave a call to their director and had a conversation with their traffic improvement division, who ultimately told me they thought it was ours. And then I got to looking at Denton County's map and found out, no, they actually own on the other side of the road. They own all the road and then to the back side of the dirt. And they actually own all of that piece. So that's the reason when they did the improvement, they moved on all the way through there when they did that improvement piece. So Denton County will have a part of that project because it comes into the road. And they will deal with some of portions for the improvement for that part. But when it actually comes to the land itself, that falls within Flower Mound's
I
jurisdiction.
think the question is, let's just assume worst case scenario, and Flower Mound doesn't do what they're supposed to do, and they're dumping the water into Double Oak, what is our recourse?
Well, then that's whenever our attorney's gonna have to sit down with their attorney.
I mean, attorneys would get involved,
Yeah.
and then obviously it would be an expense to the town. So, but we would obviously have to weigh it at the time as to exactly what the situation is. But yes, we would we're always gonna go back with something like you just talked about on the worst case. We're always gonna get our town attorney involved.
And
And if he can't do it, he'll get an attorney that works specifically into that area.
And I'll tell you this, whenever they submit designs for this, engineering plans do come out. That's public information. We will get to look at those.
Right.
And if we have serious questions or concerns that do arise, we're definitely gonna have our engineers take a look at what their engineers are putting out, and then take a look at what we have, which is great about this specific piece. We needed an engineering study of what the drainage plan is and what we actually have coming into the town as far as inflow and outflow. Now we can take these and we can compare that with those, and we can say, hey, listen, this is where the water's supposed to go out. You're talking about introducing a certain flow rate that's not gonna adhere to how much water's being taken in. We need to change that. We're coming to you and we're asking you to change that. We've had our engineers look at it. It's not gonna meet what we need. You're gonna flood these people out. So those conversations would take place
Right.
between that. That's one reason that we will be looking at that as well.
It all comes
Yes.
that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Just from my own understanding, Cummins is around 173 to maybe 193 properties?
Yes.
Give or take
The
somewhere.
conceptual design is, yes.
The original design and what you see online of that proposal is 193 homes. There is a section of the homes that will have to be approved separately from that, so that brings the number back down to roughly 173-ish. Anywhere from 2 acre to a third of an acre size lots.
And how far off is that, or is that years away, or?
Well, depending on how quickly the town of Flower Mound approves what they're doing, like I said, there's several steps that they have to go through that a town of Double Oak does not require. CDC meetings, and, land, green spaces, all sorts of stuff. I don't see them maybe starting to turn dirt until this time next year, perhaps.
And that'll depend on how aggressive they are with getting the design off the ground and how much money's actually going into the project.
Thank you.
Well, and just as a side note, there have been commitments already for lots in that area.
Wow.
Randall,
Yes, ma'am.
so for any of you that want to stay up to date and informed about all the meetings, you can actually go to the CTCC CDD development application notification, sign up to get an email every time they get presented with another proposal. So I've been getting those for over probably the last 2 years. when
And
it
that's with the
started.
city of Flower Mound.
Yeah, yes, go to the City of Flower Mound website.
Okay.
And you can sign up.
I was gonna say that acronym was, the abbreviation was even long, yeah, I apologize, so.
Sorry.
So
Yeah.
you can go to the City of Flower Mound's website,
Yes, and sign up to be notified
okay,
under their development services. You know, as you dig down, you'll find, you know, that it's specific. You can probably Google the Eden or Cummings and subscribe to the notifications.
okay.
And it is listed, Eden, also known as Cummings.
Eden Ranch, formerly Cummings Ranch.
Right.
Within
Okay.
the- And that, an acronym, that is Cross Timbers Conservation Development.
So what we'll do, so I was just, me and Pat were just talking about that as you were mentioning it. What we'll do is we'll include a hyperlink to that on our town website.
Great.
That way you don't have to go through Flower Mound, figure out their website and all their drop downs. We'll get it out there, okay? We'll make it easy for you.
You got that, Chris?
We'll get it done. Any other questions? Really?
I have,
Okay, yes, ma'am.
okay, so, there's discussion about having a stormwater utility, potentially, as a way to fund, some of these projects. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
There's a possibility of doing it.
Okay, that would come across our water bill,
Or some sort of billing.
some sort of billing.
Yeah. So that would go through council, that would be something that would be heavily introduced under a public forum, I will say that, because Patrick said that many times at a
We'll
lot of
have
those
public
meetings.
hearings, this will be vetted if, again, if.
If
We're
it's
just right now-
discussions.
Yeah,
Yes.
because, so for example, our new town administrator, Chris Wagenhauer, he comes with a background to where he's worked in the grants and bonds and area and the other municipalities he's worked in.
Mhm.
And so before we go to start trying to figure out that we gotta come back and do something like that,
Right.
is there a way that we can go do some of these other funding things? Now, keep in mind, as Scott had mentioned, some of them are 75-25, so we'd have to budget for the 25. But we wanna exhaust as many of those resources
Mhm.
and knowing that we can or can't before we wanna dive into something like that.
Right.
But we wanna bring it up now so that if it would come into place 3 years, 5 years down the road, you go, oh, that's right, I heard that once before, versus, oh my God, what is this?
Yes.
Um,
So what is the council been budgeting yearly for, I mean, because it sounds like this has been an ongoing problem since 2007. So my question would be, you know, what has the town of Double Oak been budgeting every year or putting into a fund for having a project done periodically?
I can say that, I'm gonna say it like this, and this is just my interpretation, and you can tell me whether it's different or not. I think it's come up as a as-need basis. When there's an improvement or there's something that's brought up for a major project regarding drainage or flooding issues, they've taken an approach of having the engineer study done, and then they bring it to council to see if they vote to proceed forward and whether or not they get enough of buy-in from the residents to make the necessary improvements. Some have taken place off of the study that was done previously. There were a couple of projects that were completed in it, and there were others that weren't, that basically echoed the sentiment that I said earlier. Some of the residents said, no, you're not doing that improvement to the project, which killed that on the vine.
So what you're saying is the town has never said,
Not that,
we're gonna need in the future this amount of funds to fund a certain project, even if we do it in particular stages?
Not on that scale.
And so we're going to
Yeah. It's
take a certain
something,
percentage and we're gonna put it over into this account, and we're gonna hold it for several years until we're ready to do that project.
not that I'm aware of,
Okay,
and I can talk from a current perspective.
okay.
And that's why we broke up, so we had drainage and roads combined together. We were always just doing roads,
Right,
never
well,
really doing drainage.
and I saw with the budget last year, you only had $100,000
Right.
going to roads, which really isn't
Well,
that
but there's, part of our fund balances are tied to that as well.
so yeah, like SLFRF, we're using the remainder of that money for the road project. So that was one of the reasons for the designation for a limited amount, because they were pulling from that other funding stream.
Not everything is budgeted for when we have fund balance. We designate certain fund balance. But you bring up a great question, and that is that since this council has started to look at the two separate. We're starting to take, and of course, the study that comes in, we're starting to know that we may have to do $100,000 for crack seal, and now we've got to do $100,000 for cross culverts. And I can see that as becoming a really good reality over the next 2 or 3 budget cycles. Is that it just used to all be lumped together. And it just seemed like, whatever, we'll do an emergency repair to Meadow Knoll with a cross culvert because we have to. And not really truly budgeting the way it should, and that's what this council is beginning to work on.
Okay, and, and two, if you go through an outside company of using the water department to have a stormwater utility that's built into your water bill every month, they're gonna take a percentage of that, as opposed to you just going in and regulating that yourself and setting that aside for the budget. Is that not correct?
It would be an offset is, do we have enough resources in the town to administer, town administration administer something like that? Like, we have not even gone near down the road. It's something we gotta start doing research on.
Yeah.
But we only brought it up so that it becomes a known, common term.
Right.
Because that would be a way that we could build the coffers quickly. Versus doing it by taking ad valorem tax and sales tax revenue from the town, which is fairly flat and fairly consistent, and start to peel that away to do some of these major projects. I mean, that's the hardest part about our town is the fact that we're built out.
Right.
The easiest part about the town is we're built out. The reality is, though, that as we look at funding our town, whether it be today or in 5 years or 7 years, we're at the mercy of our utility taxes, we're at the mercy of our ad valorem taxes, and we're at the mercy of the sales taxes. After that, that's how we have to run the town. And the last thing that we would ever want to do, I would never want to do, and it's been a point of contention for 3 or 4 years, is we've got to make sure that we fund our Double Oak Police Department, because we all love them, right?
Yeah.
And we've still got to be able to maintain the infrastructure of the town, and we love that. And now this drainage thing that's been dogging us for over 50 years, because we just turned 50, I think it's time that we do get a little bit more serious about how we can handle things. And as we've learned through this study, the fact that we own those cross culverts, to me, that's a no-brainer, as we've had some conversations, is let's find out where they're at, let's figure out which ones are the worst, and let's start at the bottom and start to move to the top, and then we put those into just like we would for crack seal and mill and oil. That is a way to do it without coming to you and going, I need to take $25 every month from you. Well, we have.
Say 5 or 6.
Okay, we have 1 acre and 2 acre lots.
Yes, sir.
It's all based upon the size.
Yeah, so this is something that you guys want to start addressing over the next several years, right?
Yeah, I would like to take and begin an outline, because, there's gonna be mayors and councils after us. What we'd like to do is set the table so that so we can continue to pick up and work on this. Do we have 54 million to drop on something? No, we don't. We do not. That's
Yes.
sorry.
So I've got a question, it's more about the flooding. So all of this will get the water moving out of everyone's properties, but it's still gonna end up in the creek.
Yes.
The creek is what backs up. We talk about going from the bottom up, that's FEMA. Are we working with our FEMA manager and how we're going to get that water moving once it hits Lusk and over to the golf course? Because all those water's coming down, it still gets stuck there at the creek.
So, you want to touch briefly on that, because I think we did a really high overview, but one of the red boxes that actually is included on this is the southern portion, and that one was for retention, or was that? Detention. It was for detention. That was for a very large detention pond to take flow out from that creek and to move water into a holding area and let it flow out slowly. That was a consideration as a part of the concept. Now again, that property does not fall into the town of Double Oak.
But is FEMA,
It would be something that's a part of the study that we're gonna have to do and go ask about grant funding and what that looks like and what kind of improvements are. It doesn't just stop with Double Oak, it's gonna have to go even further out than just us. It will be something that we would have to talk with Denton County and the FEMA department specifically with them.
do we have a FEMA flood manager that's responsible for
double O?
We do, and I've actually talked with them previously, because we've had issues down there in the last couple of years since I've been here. I've had to ask them questions specifically in regards to that section, because we've had some property that's tried to be purchased out there and development purposes and what's allowed to be done and not allowed to be done, and so yes, we do. Denton County does have a designation for that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I live on Simmons, box 6, down at the bottom. And we have box culverts that run under the road. And on our side, you know, there's rocks and concrete that the city put in for when the water runs up to the box culvert. And then on the other side, they did the same thing. There's concrete and boulders or rocks on the going on the outside. On my side, they're smooth. You know, the water runs in and it's smooth. On the other side, when the city put those in, they made the rocks stick up like a foot and a half, you know, all over the place. They said to slow the water down a little bit.
Yeah.
But over the years, that whole side is filled up with dirt. And now we have trees, you know, 2 to 3 foot around trees, you know, 6 inches to a foot, right where the box culvert's empty, and it's just blocking all that water from coming out of the culverts.
Are you, you said it's Simmons and
Simmons
Kings?
and Kings. It's the Kings culvert.
Are you on the northwest corner?
No. No. Yes, the northwest?
Yeah.
I'm almost certain that that's where it's at.
Yes.
Yeah, northwest corner, I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about on the south side of the road is where the issue is.
Not on my side, but on the other side.
I'm very aware of that. It's where the house is for sale.
Yeah, as far as maintaining that area,
So,
does that fall to the city since they did
no,
that concrete
and that's
stuff?
the issue. This question actually came up earlier today with one of the residents in the area. It's not the only time it's come up. I've had council inquire about it previously as well. That is actually owned by the private citizen who owns that
But I'm
property.
talking about the part of the concrete that the city put in. They put in.
Well, you can't see it, and I don't know how far it goes, so you're
can't see it
probably
because
right.
It's now covered
Yeah.
with dirt.
Yeah, I
You
don't,
can see it on my side, but
Right.
you can't see it on the other side.
so
because it's
typically
now
when you
covered with
leave,
dirt.
yeah, no, I
The
understand that.
city made that problem when they put that in.
So the town made the improvement.
Uh-huh.
I've actually looked at the improvement plan for that side, but once it leaves that box culvert and goes onto the private property side,
But the private property owner did not build that 10 foot of concrete and rock boulders on the other side of the culvert.
yeah, and the
That was
problem
done-
is that,
That was done when Simmons Road was built and they put in those box culverts.
so typically whenever that usually happens, whatever they do on the improvement side, the town will be responsible for what the culvert and the travel underneath. But when it enters into the property, they have no rights to the improvement on that other side. On the other side, you can't even see it. So I haven't even seen the rocks. I know you're probably right. I don't know what it looks
When it was
like.
done, you could see it, but
Yeah.
now it's covered with dirt and trees.
Which falls to which is the issue falls to the property owner. I'm gonna tell you this, so this
I
is
mean, it's
what,
not my property, but
Yeah,
I
I
still
get it.
disagree, because the city made the problem, not the homeowner.
so the town can put the improvement there for the culvert to travel underneath the road, but once it enters into someone's property and they no longer maintain it, or they're not keeping it free flow, and the town didn't go purchase the rights down for that drainage area that goes back
And what
there.
gave them the right to put that concrete there?
That would have been the owner, would have
No, they never
given,
gave them their permission to do it. They didn't ask permission to do it on my side of the road.
Are you talking about Flower Mound or?
he's talking about at Kings Road and Simmons intersection. So basically, you're saying they infringed upon your rights and they did it without you
Yes.
signing off or anybody
I
signing
mean, you
off
can
on it?
drive down there, you can see
Yeah.
the.
I know
rocks.
where it's at, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they just put.
I'll be
that-
glad to look
They-
over those documents with
They tried to
you.
do the same rocky portion on our side, and we said, no, we can't have it that way, because we gotta mow our lawn.
We
Yeah,
gotta maintain it.
You can't make it all rocky on our side. So they made our side all nice and smooth, because that's what we asked.
We
Yeah.
told them to
But
pull it
our
down.
Yeah, we'll have to look at
neighbors.
it.
But they never asked our permission to put it in, they just did
So,
it.
the only thing I can do is go and look at the documentation, I can't speak for them. I can just tell you typically in most cases, I don't know if it is in this case, but I can tell you, there is a property line pin, and it exists on that property, unless they put it in the documentation when the improvements were made, which we'll go and look at. I can tell you that everything that's on that side of the property is actually higher than the culvert on the other side. And I do know what you're talking about. There's a lot of debris and it falls on the property of that on that home
The
side.
debris out further is the property owner.
Yeah.
I'm just talking right outside the culvert, where they put in a big concrete and rock.
So- So if the town owns it and they wanna come in and clear that section, they can clear that section, but it's not gonna do any good if the property owner doesn't clear their side. It's just gonna immediately pass
When you
back
put
to
a
us.
tree this big right in front of the box
Yeah.
culvert, 6 inches away, it's gonna slow.
Well,
water
the town
down.
can't take
If
out,
that tree were 10 feet away, it's not gonna have the same
I
impact.
understand, but at the same time, the town can't go in and take out someone's tree either, so then they're
It's
gonna
not
have.
their tree.
Well, no, the tree grew up after they created the problem.
So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of assumption. Let's look at documentation on both sides and let's figure that out. Yeah, I think, because what I can tell you this is the town can't accept responsibility for someone's property, especially when we have no rights to maintain it. A lot of times people think that the town of Double Oak has a right of way or an easement, a 30-foot easement that exists, and it doesn't exist in most cases. And on those particular property, I've actually looked at that property's documentation of where their pins rest at and where it starts at. And it literally is right after you exit the road.
But I didn't put that stuff in.
Well, I'm not saying that you did, and I appreciate you bringing those facts forward. I'm just letting you know, wherever the property line exists at, unless there's documentation that clearly indicates that the town is responsible for that, anything that travels underneath the road, they'll maintain. But when it goes into the property, the town doesn't have a right to go in and access it and start tearing it apart.
They even took the culvert that runs underneath my driveway and tied it into the box culvert.
You were there during that project?
Yeah.
And
I
they
watched
didn't.
them do it.
We'll have to look at what they did. I mean, there's a lot of, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, you allow them to make the improvement.
My water has nowhere to go because it can't go straight into the box culvert.
Yeah.
It doesn't come out.
We'll do the
and then go
research
in,
on it, we'll come out, look at it, and
Yeah.
we'll work down on
And
it.
it hooks in underneath the road.
Do you have a prioritization plan for the 5 projects that you mentioned here? Is it the 5 major concerns that you have numbered on page 7 through 8?
We do not, because of the extensive amount of money it is. We needed to get these meetings, we need to just gather as much information, we need to gather more information, and then determine what our next steps could be. So the takeaway from these meetings will be is I've got a lot of notes, I do a separate page for each meeting. We've got some other notes, and we're gonna create an outline of information. And so the answer is no at this moment, because of the sheer extent of the cost of it. So we've got to sit down and figure out what we can fund, what we could pay for out of our fund balances to improve some things that we have control over. With the larger projects, when you're talking about $8 million, $11 million, $3 million, we have not even begun a discussion on that.
I'm concerned about the drawing that shows the detention pond overlaying our existing pond.
This one here?
That,
Scott, you want to talk to that?
yeah, it works quite well, quite frankly. I've been there for 30 years. It does slow down the water. It can handle probably 14 acre-feet of water on a given day. To slow it down, you run over the dam to the other end. So it works quite well as opposed to detention.
Right, and a reason why it was selected is because it's a good location to do that. So these are concepts. This is not saying we're gonna go out and do this. This was, you gotta kind of look at the town as a whole and say, here are some locations where you could potentially do some regional detention improvements. And that was one of them.
Okay, good. Because, I mean, it looks like the one of those options was to put this massive drain down the middle of Woodland instead of letting it drain the way it's supposed to through the pond there, which doesn't seem.
This is what, Double Oaks Drive here? Yeah, coming off of Double Oaks Drive, right where the.
And I'd like to say that the backup that occurs, it creates a lake on the north side of that roadway because the pipe is not large enough to handle the water flow under large rain events. At that point, it overtops.
Yeah, it was the first picture he showed, the big round pipe. Yeah.
So that particular, the yellow line, that pipe, that would be if we didn't do that detention. That would just be try to alleviate some of that flooding that's seen upstream of the pond.
That's where it flows into that pond, is where that started, yeah, Double Oak.
right? So we would try to capture some of that there and try to alleviate some of the flooding that's occurring, backing up upstream.
Well, it's backing up your Double Oaks Drive because it cannot get through that pipe fast enough. I watched it.
Which one's double Oak Drive? Can you show me?
Yeah, plus the roadway is 20 feet higher when you start from that pipe and goes up to 30 feet at the corner, and then farther up, Woodland Trail keeps going uphill, it's probably 50 feet higher than that pipe.
I think ideally you'd want to capture it even further upstream. The problem is there's no roadway in between. You have to go through private property. That's why we stopped it right there. And it's a concept level improvement right now.
Well, I do know that the culvert right there is a serious problem for the people just to the north. It creates some serious flooding. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a citizen that's up here on Little Oaks Court, that's right in this area, which is above Double Oaks Drive. The water backs up there as well. So anyway. How do we keep it upon?
Well, no one's taking it, just to be clear.
You're draining it with detention pond, right? That's what detention pond does.
So we would add additional storage potential other than what's there today. So it would still be a retention pond, but the idea would be to excavate more around that pond, provide more storage area. That's the idea. It would still be retention, but it would also have a detention function by providing more storage. You have to do some grading and some cut. Does that make sense?
The perfect example of that would be at Taylor Oaks. Taylor Oaks has a retention and a detention. I don't think that it was, well, I say this, so that there was a design standard for that, and then they have an emergency level reach, where they have an emergency dropout zone, where they have pipes that travel underneath Kings Road. So they've actually, the most southern portion of that, where they actually have this spray fountain at, that actually is the area that's supposed to hold water. When they did the development due to silt and then some of the improvements during the project, they actually hold water a lot wider. That, and they have well water that goes into there from their sprinkler system and then overflow from that as well. But that actually is a detention and a retention pond at that location. So I'm not saying it would look exactly like that, but I'm just saying that's an example of it. But this doesn't mean that they're going to do that. And it's not, we're not saying that Double Oak's going to come in and do that, because at the end of the day, this discussion would have to take place with the property owners who actually own that, because Double Oak doesn't own that. Y'all, the property owners, own that.
Yes.
If everybody around that pond goes, yeah, no, you won't be doing that, then it's, well, let's find another way somewhere else.
I've seen 4 inches in 2 hours. That's a lot. I've seen it rises from the edge of the lake, 110 feet, all the way up to the back of my property. It almost doubles its size. Okay, give or take. It's huge. It's held back by a V-shaped spillway, which works great. The higher it gets, the more it flows out. And I haven't seen any damage from any of the houses around there.
Yeah.
And it's high. It gets over 6 feet from a full mark.
Yeah.
And the only thing I saw was a paddle boat that got loose and went down and killed itself. But other than that, I think even downstream was okay until Thornhill came in and added to this down here. And you know, now we're in trouble. But we're not putting out any more water than we did before. And I've seen it split several times, no damage whatsoever up there for us.
So it's actually doing what it's supposed to do.
It's doing exactly what it's, yeah, exactly.
Well, we do like hearing that.
Yeah, and I'd like you to take my name, call me, come out, we'll walk the property, and I'll show it to you.
So, let me say this while we're talking about that. Let me show you this. So, this sheet that's actually on this table, so we realize that we can't cover all topics, and a lot of you are going to want to come back to it. So, you can put your name, email, and then what topic that you want to cover, or the date and time that you want to come out, or you can give me your email and I can send you an email, and then we can designate a time and I can come out and look at it with you, or whoever it is that you're wanting to come out and actually look at it, for that matter. It doesn't have to just be me. If you want Pat there, you can have
No, we
Pat
don't
there.
want you out there.
Yeah, well, you know, feeling's mutual. I don't want to be there either. No, Please fill that out if you do, because we realize that we only have so much time that we can take up here, but we definitely know that y'all are paying for our time and we want to absolutely come out. And if we need to have additional conversation, I absolutely love to.
The two red boxes are the largest expense in this survey. I mean, one of them's what, 15 or 11 or something, and that's, what did you call it? It was a something design? Or?
Regional detention pond?
No, the dollar amount you put on it. Some sort of a study, whatever.
Planning level?
Planning level. So today it could be 15, in 3 years it could be 18. So obviously, if you look at our town, our budget, all of that, unless we get some really heavy-duty funding from somewhere, our chances of trying to get these things done are going to be a lot harder than these yellow lines, which could be planned for somehow, could be budgeted for in the future somehow with the revenues we have coming in.
Just have a request. Now that we've spent $88,000 to do the study, and it's taken over a year to get it, and we're going to put this pamphlet or book together, so to speak, that you talked about earlier with all this information in there. Can we add like a glossary or a reference guide that might give some of these links to people where they can go and find if they need a copy of their plat, if they want to have a contact to get something from DCAD or Denton County Tax Appraisal District, any of the verbiage or the definitions or terms that have been used during these studies, where people will not have to go through the Double Up website, go to this other thing, pull up the ordinances, click on this, find this. If we could maybe have a glossary or a reference guide in the back of this booklet that you're
Yeah,
producing.
well, I mean, when I say booklet, it's
Yeah.
the information we have, it's too large. The study itself, the presentation itself, we've had citizens, hey, can I get that? Sure. Can you email it? No,
No.
it won't go through an email.
No.
So we had to put it on thumb drives and take it around, and that's why we're gonna load up the website with all this information. But those are great ideas, and yes, we can do that.
Yeah, well, maybe
Absolutely.
you can condense what we've learned here at these
Yep.
meetings, have the information readily available. If the neighbors are discussing something, they can pull this pamphlet up or booklet up and say, okay, let's look here at this link, and that will give us a guide to go and find what we need, or give us a good starting point. You know, phone numbers, contacts, names of agencies, and so
Yeah.
forth.
You can do that.
Great ideas, thank you.
I definitely want to make sure that the one thing that you did state on there, those are archive files. When you make those requests, you can, as a homeowner, you can come in, we can look at your driver's license, that's the quickest way, and we can pull that information from there, give that directly to you. There's no link on the website where I can give you plat information. We've got to go dig in the archive to get that information. So I just don't want anybody to be confused to think that we're going to somehow give you a link that you can go in and get quick access to all your property information. It's not. It is public record, but you have to make an open records request if you're not the owner. If you're the owner and you come to me, I can get it directly to you.
But
I just have to
really, in
verify.
that case, you
Yeah.
might make a note that
Yes.
records
just
are
wanted to
archived
preface
from
that.
1990 up to the present, or we have fish just for this time
Well,
period, this
yeah,
spring, whatever the circumstance might be.
I just don't want people to get confused and think that, because from 2020, prior to 2021, your archive file. And I gotta dig through a lot of old files. They're not all labeled correctly, but I will dig through every one of them to try to figure out if there is some information. But I'll make sure that there's some communication on there that lets you know, hey, contact me at this email, make a request, and we'll get back with you and get you the information. We do have to verify that you are the owner of the property before we'll release that information outside of an open records request. The quickest way to get it is to meet with me and I can get it to you. But outside of that, I just wanted to make sure, just on that piece, everything else we'll put out there. I just want to make sure when it comes to archive file, it is not that simple, and it is a little bit more intense whenever it comes to pulling that information, so.
Other questions?
Please don't forget to fill out the sheet if you have more questions or want to leave us your contact information, want us to follow back up with you, please.
So as we wrap up this evening, we're going to have the map up here till about 5 after 9. sooner if we need to. Feel free to come up and grab Scott, grab Randall, grab myself. If you really want to know what's going on, grab Scott, grab Randall. I'm just kidding. But really very much appreciate you all coming out tonight. I do have to, I want to publicly thank Chris, our town administrator, for organizing all of this, working with Crossroads Church. They have been awesome. I'd like to thank our Double Oak Police Department, Sergeant Hoffman's here around the corner there. They've been great with this. You know, it is so awesome to have a police department, a volunteer fire department like we have. I think it's what makes our town special. And so when you see them, say hello. I know you all do. They're great. They're awesome. A couple other things. We will be lighting the Christmas tree on December 2nd for a council meeting. So hopefully you can join us. If you haven't been by the park lately and you notice, we've been working diligently to grow all new grass. We resodded it after we had to do the septic system. So we're trying to make the park a much greater place. I know it's going to cause a little bit of conflict with turkey trot here in a couple weeks. I'm working through that. But you know what? Here's what's cool. We have a new stage, I believe, at Town Hall and Park. It's called Wakeman Road. And we should utilize Wakeman Road way more than we have for town events. Because we literally block off 2 blocks, and there isn't one citizen that is put out because their driveways are east and west of where we're at. So we're going to talk to the turkey trot about maybe sliding a little bit down, sliding it a little bit down further east so that we can still preserve the grass. Because I think we got something really good going in the park and we want to keep it that way. So hopefully we'll see you all out there on December 2nd. Thank you very much for taking the evening with us. Appreciate you, Scott. Appreciate you, Randall, for everything you've done. You have a great evening, and like I said, we're going to be around here for a few minutes if you'd like to talk to us. Thank you.
Well, I just think it's such a good deal. It's pretty I'll get down there one of these days. Next week. Plan next week. Come down next week. I need to come down and yeah, my movie. Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah, we got a whole refrigerator from ours a long time
I'm running up my calendar right now. I'll tell you here in about 5 seconds once I get this calendar up. Open, baby. On Tuesday. What time?
You take screenshots of your face.
Your place?
Yeah.
I'll put you down. It's always good to see you.
Facial expressions than anybody I know.
You saw that one, right? 1 o'clock? Yes, ma'am. After I eat, which is good. I'm a grouch.
It's never good when you're hangry.
Yeah, that's actually a fact for me.
No, seriously.
Yes, ma'am.
So is it question? I know we are, Eric,
Yes.
I know you come out all the time now for
I would love to go in the yard and look at it.
Okay.
What day do y'all have?
Plus the neighbors.
No, it's fine. Do you want to call? Do you want to email me? Okay. You want me to give you my email? You can. It doesn't matter. So really, I'm the guy who received the code enforcement, the permits, the everything, and I may end up after this conversation.
Is there a link to your email on the website?
Yeah, if you look for Randall, it'll show up. It'll have my email that's on there.
So my only point is we've got a cross culvert.
We got a cross culvert.
It is very narrow.
I want to come look at it.
It just blows water like a fire hydrant.
Yeah.
It comes from Pepperport across,
Oh,
and we're on Plantation.
Sucks.
Huh?
Y'all's area sucks.
Yeah, thanks.
I just put cones down Pepperport.
Oh, I'm
because there's a total jacked up erosion issue out there that I had no idea about. One of the guys with the farm equipment came up and he goes, "Man, I need you to look at something." I said, "Okay, show me." And it ended up taking like most of one side of the road.
Oh wow!
It's starting to break off and it's got a void in it. I didn't know.
I mean, we're about 6 inches of erosion from our propane tank.
So you can, if you want. When are y'all available?
I'm home all day.
We both work from home, so. But we do have a cross culvert that goes under our street.
What's your address?
6014 Plantation Lane.
And the erosion is all due to the water pressure.
Okay, what's your name?
Chris and Cheryl Bump. With a bump on that.
That's what I have. Chris and Cheryl, what do you have a phone number that I can take?
Oh, you want mine? Take mine because he doesn't answer. He's on the phone most of the time.
Oh, he's a guy.
214.
I'm saying like, go ahead.
536 3058.
All right, I got you. I'll put you down for tomorrow. I'll try to swing by there.
Great.
I will put you around 2 o'clock. Okay?
Okay.
I got you.
All right. Awesome.
You'll have a good day.
Thanks.
So I have a 9 a.m. Well, it's a long day because I'm here to council. So I get here at 8. I can. What time? Anytime after 1? Let's do it. Then I'll put you at 2. Okay, what's your address? 220. What's your name? Right?
Yeah. And then talk to my mother-in-law, Daddy.
Oh, I know. And I know who exactly you already got the permit that's going. I knew I recognized you. Okay, what's your phone number?
That's on my house.
Yes.
Airport 817. Great Point. Number 9000.
Okay.
You just walk in, I know. We'd ask, but it's like, it'd be better. We've got a big giant plaque that we surveyed them because we just bought it, so we could have the drainage is part.
Okay. Yep.
I'll see you around. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. You know I will. It's always good to see you. Where? Them pieces of shit. Is it the ones that are on the corner of I was telling her earlier, I said, she asked me, she goes, we're not going to do that damn thing across the street. We're going to have to leave it. She goes, well, what's that mean? I said, we're going to have to hire somebody to remove it and then put a lead. Because I went over and talked to them, they sent me an email. I told the guy, I said, look, you need to cut the tree down. It's a safety hazard. This is what the electric company cut those, and they didn't shred them. I said, no, they didn't. I know they didn't. They don't leave anything. Yeah, the one who looked like he's a farm-bred kid. He freaking came out there in overalls and talked to me. He goes, I'm mowing. I go, I get you're mowing. I said, but you can't leave the limbs like that. Yeah, that's correct. That's why he's gotten a notice before. We're going to have to just go ahead and take it. I'll get with him and
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
someone's but it's got that problem. I was telling your wife earlier, I said, look, let me tell you, they own the whole area that's back there. And that they were asking about that earlier, and I go, I hear what you're saying, and I'm telling you, it's owned by the owners. And we don't have the right to go in and dig that out. But I'll take a look at the plan.
Had a good time.
Thank you, ma'am. It's good to see y'all. It's good to see you again. I'll catch you when you're mowing. I see you mowing all the time. You're the most mowing son of a gun I ever seen. Bye.
Can we give this to you?
You can, absolutely. It's going to come to me regardless, so I'll take it. I appreciate it. Thank you. And do you want me to reach out to y'all about coming out there?
Yeah, I think so, because
Okay.
we're not sure exactly what all we need to do or should do for one thing, and we do think there is what you call a cross culvert that comes at the corner of our lot, we think.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, we're close.
Good to see you.
We're on Trailing Oaks.
What day are y'all at home?
We both work from home.
Oh, so then that's easy. Okay, so then on Monday I'm already going to be out. I could come in the afternoon at 3. Does 3 o'clock work for y'all? Okay, what's the address?
181 Trailing Oaks.
What's your name again?
Thompson is the last name, then I'm Michelle.
What's the number?
It's 940.
You already gave it to me. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay, that's okay.
I'm putting it on my calendar, so I can go ahead and mark y'all in. So that way I don't plan anything. Okay, I got y'all. So then,
Because we don't know exactly what we should do, need to do, and like I said, we think there is a line that comes across the back.
I'll look at it.
Now, we did just recently take out a huge tree, I didn't go for like 100 years,
I
but
don't know if you know which neighbor there that runs the lawn care business down behind us.
Bowden, mowing. Yeah.
we just took out a tree that
He was worried. The tree had several dead limbs. He was worried. It was a big old elm tree. He was worried about the limbs falling on his property. And he suggested
so we did do that.
a tree guy find it.
Okay.
It was right there on the corner.
Okay. Yeah, I can look at it. I'll try to pull y'all's file.
Yeah, I think we've got a copy of our survey, so we'll try to look
Okay.
at it too.
And if I have one too, I'll look for it, because I digitally can get access to it if we have it.
Yeah, our home was built in '97, so it's not new, but you know, and we've been out there since 2001.
I get, and what I was saying earlier, you know, I can still access a lot of 85 files, but when the home is like in early 80s, it's a hit or miss sometimes. But newer ones, like 90s and before, and rare circumstances, depending on how they built it, who they built it with, most of them.
It was fun. We don't know a lot of neighbors, even though we've been out there forever, but we just meet our neighbor way up on the corner, and he said something about, oh, I lived out here till the '80s, and I'm like, wow.
There's still a few of them that have. Some of them are longer than that. There's some of them that are hidden. I didn't even know were backed up between houses that are far, far back there. I went the other day to deliver one on Simmons Road, and I got over there and I go, "Where's the driveway here?" I thought it went to the other house in their backyard. No, it goes to a property that's gridlocked back behind all of them. I had to walk all the way down their driveway to the back of the lot and put on there. I never knew that house existed. And I'm like, okay, well, there's another house back there. I didn't know that. They got a door hanger at least, so yeah. I'll meet with y'all. I'll come out. I'll look at it.
Sounds good.
It's a pleasure to meet y'all. Thank you so much for your time. Yes, ma'am.
Y'all did good.
Thank you. What address is it? I think so. They switched it. They had it for Friday and they moved it to. Yes. I looked on there and I go, I always work from my emails from the bottom up, first to last. And I got in there and I go, okay, I put it in the calendar for Friday, and then I get 2 or 3 emails down, and then it says, I looked at it and I go, that's the same address. I said, well, that's for Monday. I said, well, let me go back in there. And then an email after that said, oh, by the way, we want to cancel this one and we want to move it. And I go, well, dadgummit, all right, let me erase this one and let me move it. I got it, though.
I am sorry about you having to do it. Anyway, so I guess I'll see you Monday.
Yep.
Oh, I'm not sure what time it was set for. They just said
185 is just, I went ahead and earmarked it for 9 a.m.
Okay.
But it's anywhere in the a.m. It'll be for sure.
Anyway, thanks. We'll look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, we'll get your final done.
And that You know, that culvert there, the opening spread, it's the whole thing, because our property extends across.
That's a huge, it's one of the biggest ones. But still, it gets. I've seen y'all still hold water even at a halfway point sometimes.
Well, the water, when the lake is full, the water's up to the culvert.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I've seen it. It usually is like that. This last year was the first time I've seen it dry.
It's been a very dry year.
It has been.
But I can tell you what does happen, because I've watched it for many times over the last 30 years. Or since '94 when they put that big pipe in.
Yeah.
Okay. The top of that pipe cannot even be utilized because it is actually above the lowest points on the both sides of the height of double.
Okay.
So when it gets to be such a, when the water is overtopping Gullo Drive,
yeah,
it's not even utilized by all of the pipe because
the road's lower on the other side. And I said the roads on the other side are lower than it is than the pipe is higher in the road. So does it usually go around and use that part if it does get into a high?
When it's that way, water will flow over on both sides of the hump.
Yeah.
And that's unusual, but it does happen.
They didn't want to set it lower?
Well, if you look, it's actually, it's dropped.
It has dropped?
No, I mean, if you look at the angle coming in, it is sitting lower than the...
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, I almost wonder why they didn't actually just set the pipe lower.
Well, I found the notes from back what Mayor Cook wrote back in '94. Would you like to see that?
You have it?
Yeah, I got it. Some of his comments about the culvert. Whenever you come out, I may ask you about it, because I don't see any easements for that ditch back there anyway.
Wouldn't be the first time.
The only easement I see on my plat is for the power line. I thought that was interesting when they said they put that in. I don't know how I cannot remember how it's built up.
More importantly, you got
No, that was actually also the news across the files. Oh, I see. They don't be doing that tomorrow.
This is hilarious.
I thought you could.
Says we need a speed bump.
Well, it is. I can tell you.
Now, when you do hazard that thing if you ain't careful.
I've seen some of them get aired.
Oh, I believe it. I see the scratch marks too. I see them, so I know it happens. That's actually hilarious. That's priceless. I'll be out on Monday for sure.
Okay.
If you want to talk during that time, we can talk then too.
I was going to say we can talk.
Absolutely.
Got a few minutes. So try to point out what I'm seeing there because I've watched it for 30 years. Actually, it's been 28 since.
When I've seen too that it started like sometimes that'll slough off between wet and dry seasons. I see it kind of gets a little bit wider in some spots, like jagged because the dirt drops off in there where it's eroding. I almost wish it would get compacted right there on those sides, like dig it out of the angle and then compact it in. So
you know, the downside.
Yeah, on the downside.
You realize that it's part of the pond itself. The pond is part of the pond.
But it hasn't been here recently, at least the last year or so. It hasn't. Before it did, when I first came, it was water. There was water.
Well, earlier this year it was there.
It was there?
It comes and goes. It's dry. But
because I even see some spots with a line, they've got a utility line of some sort that just kind of goes across there. Or some kind of line or something that just sits there and it drapes across it whenever it gets dry enough. You'll see that.
Hey, thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's good to see you, man.
Thanks for the informative
anytime
contribution. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll have to think what you mean there.
It's like a black pipe. It's like a little black.
Oh, wait a minute. You're talking about the pipe that comes from the pipe?
It goes from one dirt pile to the other side where it crosses over the pond access where that's actually at. When I'm out there, I'll show you what I'm talking
Okay, well, you may be talking about my pump. I've got a pump down in
about.
the
That may be
pond
what it is.
that runs the pipe all the way up to right at the culvert so that it can keep the water fresh.
Yes, that's probably what it is. I go, damn, look at that. I said the thing is exposed. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I maintain.
That's perfectly fine. As long as it's yours, that's all that matters. All right, it's good to see you.
Thank you. See you, buddy.
Always. Thank you.